I swear I didn't mean to text you. My baby just needed milk. But what Sophie Miller didn't know was that this single desperate message was about to reach one of the most powerful men in the city, and nothing in her life would ever be the same again. A better hook. She only needed $7 for milk, but she accidentally texted a billionaire who was about to change her entire life. Sophie Miller stared at her cracked phone screen, her hands trembling as her baby's soft cries filled the tiny apartment. The kind of place where the heater barely worked and the fridge held little more than a half-empty bottle of water and a fading hope that tomorrow might somehow be better. She swallowed hard, typing quickly with shaking fingers. Hey, can you please send me a little money? I just need to buy milk for my baby. I'll pay you back, I promise. Her vision blurred as she hit send without double-checking the number. Because when your child hasn't eaten properly in almost 2 days, pride becomes a luxury you can't afford. And for a brief moment, the room went quiet except for her breathing, as if the world itself was waiting to see what would happen next. Across the city, 40 floors above the noise and chaos, Alexander Reed sat at the head of a long glass conference table, his tailored suit flawless, his expression unreadable as executives around him discussed million-dollar decisions. His phone buzzed once, then again, an unknown number. He almost ignored it, but something made him glance down, just for a second, and that was all it took. His eyes scanned the message, and for reasons he couldn't immediately explain, he didn't dismiss it as spam, didn't hand it off to an assistant, didn't block the number like he usually would. Instead, he read it. Again, slower this time. I just need to buy milk for my baby. The words didn't belong in his world of contracts and acquisitions. They felt out of place, raw, unpolished, real, and that's exactly what made them impossible to ignore. Back in her apartment, Sophie's heart dropped as she reread the contact name. This wasn't her friend. This wasn't anyone she knew. She had texted the wrong number. Panic surged through her chest as she quickly typed, "I'm so sorry. Wrong number. Please ignore." That her. Face flushed with embarrassment even though no one could see her. She pulled her baby closer, whispering softly, trying to soothe both the child and herself, convincing herself it didn't matter, that nothing would come of it anyway, because things like miracles didn't happen to people like her. But then her phone buzzed again, a reply, short, direct, and completely unexpected. "Who is this?" Sophie froze, her breath catching in her throat as she stared at the screen, unsure whether to respond or disappear. Because sometimes the scariest thing isn't being ignored, it's being noticed, especially when you have nothing left to hide and everything to lose. Sophie stared at the message for what felt like forever, her thumb hovering over the screen as her baby whimpered softly against her chest, the weight of the moment pressing down on her in a way she could not explain, because this was not just a reply, this was a door she had not meant to open, and now she had no idea what was on the other side of it. She swallowed hard and typed slowly, carefully choosing every word as if it could somehow protect her from judgment. "I am really sorry," I texted. "The wrong number. Please just ignore me." She hesitated, then added, "I did not mean to bother you," and hit send before she could change her mind, immediately wishing she could take it back, because part of her feared that whoever was on the other end might respond with anger or mockery, the kind she had grown used to from people who had never known what it meant to struggle. Across the city, Alexander Reed leaned back slightly in his chair, tuning out the ongoing discussion around him. As the message appeared on his screen, his expression remained calm, but his focus had shifted entirely. He read her words again, noticing the apology, the restraint, the absence of manipulation. It did not sound like a scam. It sounded real. And that unsettled him more than anything, because real problems did not belong in his carefully controlled world. Yet here it was, sitting in the palm of his hand, asking nothing from him now, retreating just as quickly as it had appeared. He typed a response, before he could overthink it. "If it was a mistake, why did you ask for money?" Then paused, his finger hovering for just a second before pressing send, as if even he was unsure why he was continuing this conversation. Sophie's phone buzzed again, and her heart skipped. She read the message and felt her chest tighten, not because of what he said, but because he had not ignored her. She looked around her small apartment, at the peeling paint on the walls, at the empty counter, at the reality she had tried to hide even from herself. And for a brief moment, she considered lying, saying it was a joke, something careless and meaningless. But the sound of her baby's soft cry broke that thought instantly. She could not lie about this, not when the truth was sitting right in her arms. Her fingers trembled as she typed. Because it is true. She stopped, then continued. I would not have asked if I had another option. She stared at the message, her breathing uneven, then added one more line. But I understand if you do not believe me. And sent it before she could regret being honest. Alexander read her reply in silence. The room around him continuing with its polished conversations, numbers, projections, strategies, none of it reaching him anymore because something about her words felt different. There was no pressure, no demand, just a quiet admission of reality. And that was what caught him off guard. He tapped his pen lightly against the table, a habit he had when thinking, then looked down at his phone again. This time not as a distraction, but as a decision waiting to be made. He typed, slowly, deliberately, where are you located? And as he sent it, even he knew this was no longer about a wrong number. This was about whether he was willing to step into a life completely different from his own, even if just for a moment. Sophie's fingers froze above the screen as she read his question. Where are you located? And for a moment, everything inside her told her not to answer, because giving a stranger that kind of information felt like crossing a line she could not uncross, especially when she had already embarrassed herself enough. But then her baby shifted in her arms, letting out a small, tired cry that sounded weaker than before. And that sound cut through every doubt she had. She looked down at the tiny face, depending on her for everything, and realized that fear was a luxury she could not afford right now. She exhaled slowly and typed her response, hesitating between honesty and caution. I am in Southside, near Maple Street. She paused, then added, it is okay if you do not want to help. I understand. Because even now, she was trying to make it easier for him to walk away, as if preparing herself for disappointment would somehow make it hurt less when it came. Across the city, Alexander read her reply and immediately recognized the area. It was not somewhere he had ever personally visited, but he knew enough to understand what it meant. Older buildings, limited opportunities, the kind of place people rarely left once they were stuck there. He leaned forward slightly, his attention now completely detached from the meeting around him. Someone was speaking directly to him, asking for approval on a decision worth millions of dollars. But he did not respond because in that moment, a different kind of decision carried more weight than any business deal he had faced that day. He opened a map on his phone, zooming into the street she mentioned, studying it for a second longer than necessary, as if trying to visualize her life through a screen, then switched back to the messages, his jaw tightening slightly, not out of anger, but something unfamiliar, something closer to concern. Sophie watched the typing indicator appear on her screen and felt her heartbeat quicken, each second stretching. Longer than the last, she was not expecting help anymore. Not really, but the fact that he had not disappeared yet made it impossible to fully let go of that small, dangerous hope building inside her. She adjusted her baby gently, whispering softly, trying to keep her calm while she waited for whatever came next. Then his message arrived, simple, direct, and completely unexpected. Do you have a store nearby? Sophie blinked, confused by the question. She quickly thought about it. The nearest place was a small convenience store about 3 blocks away. Not ideal, but close enough if she had the money. She typed back, yes, about a 5-minute walk, then added why, before she could stop herself. Alexander read her response and made a decision that felt both impulsive and strangely necessary. He opened another app, entered a few details, and within seconds completed a transaction that meant almost nothing in his world, but could mean everything in hers. Then he returned to the message thread and typed, check your phone, before setting it down for just a moment, as if giving the moment space to unfold on its own. Sophie frowned slightly at the message, not understanding what he meant, until her phone buzzed again, this time not with a text, but a notification. Her eyes widened as she opened it, staring at the screen in disbelief, her breath catching as she read the amount. It was far more than what she had asked for, more than just milk. More than just today. Her hands began to shake, not from fear this time, but from something deeper, something she had not felt in a long time. Relief mixed with disbelief. She looked down at her baby, tears forming in her eyes as she whispered softly, "It is okay now." But even as those words left her lips, one question echoed in her mind louder than anything else. Why would a complete stranger do this for her? And what would he expect in return? Sophie stared at the number on her phone again, as if it might disappear if she blinked, her fingers hovering just above the screen, afraid to touch it, afraid it was some kind of mistake layered on top of another mistake. But the balance did not change. It stayed there, real and undeniable. More money than she had seen in months, enough to cover not just milk but groceries, diapers, maybe even a little breathing room she had forgotten existed. Her chest tightened as a wave of emotion rushed through her, not just relief, but something heavier, something complicated, because help like this never came without a reason. And that thought made her hesitate. She quickly typed, "I think you sent too much," then paused, staring at the words, before adding, "I only needed a little." Her honesty felt small compared to what he had just done, but it was the only thing she had to offer. Across the city, Alexander Reed glanced down at his phone again as her message appeared, and for the first time that day, a faint, almost imperceptible shift touched his expression. Not quite a smile, but something close, because instead of gratitude or excitement, she had responded with restraint, with honesty, and that intrigued him more than anything else. He replied simply, "Buy what you need." Then after a brief pause added, "For you and your baby," before locking his phone and finally looking up, only to realize the entire room had gone quiet. Every executive at the table watching him, waiting for his decision. He blinked once, as if returning from somewhere far away, then continued the meeting as if nothing had happened. But his mind was no longer fully there. Sophie read his message and felt her throat tighten again. This time not from panic, but from something unfamiliar, a quiet sense of being seen, even by someone who did not know her. She looked down at her baby, gently brushing a strand of hair away from her small face, and whispered, "We are going to be okay." But even as she said it, she knew this moment was bigger than just survival. It was a turning point she did not fully understand yet. She quickly wrapped her baby in a worn but clean blanket, grabbed her keys, and stepped outside, the cool air hitting her face as she walked down the street toward the small convenience store just a few blocks away, each step feeling lighter than the last. Not because her problems were gone, but because for the first time in a long while, she was not carrying them alone. Inside the store, the fluorescent lights buzzed softly overhead as she picked up a gallon of milk, a small pack of diapers, and hesitated for a moment before adding a loaf of bread and some fruit to her basket. Simple things, but to her, they felt like a quiet miracle. At the register, she paid without counting every dollar twice, without the usual knot of anxiety tightening in her chest. And as the cashier handed her the receipt, Sophie realized something had shifted inside her, something small but powerful, like hope carefully returning after being gone for far too long. As she stepped back outside, balancing the bag in one hand and holding her baby close with the other, her phone buzzed again and her heart skipped, because deep down, she knew this was not the end of the story. It was only the beginning of something she had never planned for, something that had started with a mistake, but was slowly becoming something else entirely. The cool air outside felt different. Now, lighter somehow, as Sophie walked back toward her apartment with the small plastic bag in her hand. But before she could even reach the corner, her phone buzzed again. She shifted the bag slightly and pulled it out, her heart tightening as she saw his name appear once more. "Did you get what you needed?" The message was simple, almost casual, but it carried a weight she could not ignore. She stared at it for a moment, unsure how to respond, because no one had checked on her like that in a long time. Not without expecting something in return, she typed slowly, "Yes, thank you, more than enough," then hesitated before adding, "I do not know how to repay you." And as soon as she sent it, she felt that familiar tension return, the unspoken rule she had learned from life, that nothing this generous ever came without a cost. Across the city, Alexander read her message and leaned back slightly, his gaze thoughtful. He understood exactly what she was implying without her saying it directly, and for a brief moment, He considered ending it there, telling her it was nothing, that she owed him nothing. But something about her situation kept pulling him back in. He replied, "You do not owe me anything." Then after a pause added, "But I would like to ask you something." And as he sent it, even he knew this was the moment where things could shift in a direction neither of them expected. Sophie stopped walking entirely as she read his message, her body going still in the middle of the sidewalk, the noise of distant traffic fading into the background as her thoughts raced. This was it, the condition, the part she had been bracing for. Her grip tightened slightly on the bag as she typed. "What is it?" Her pulse quickening as she waited for his answer. A few seconds later, the reply came. "Are you working right now?" Sophie blinked, caught off guard. This was not what she expected. Not even close. She glanced down at her baby, then back at the screen. No, she typed honestly, "I had to leave my last job after my baby was born." She paused, then added, "I've been trying to find something, but it is not easy." Her chest tightened slightly as she admitted it because saying it out loud made it feel more real. There was a longer pause this time, long enough for doubt to creep back in, long enough for Sophie to wonder if she had said the wrong thing, if maybe this was where the conversation would finally end. But then her phone buzzed again, and the message that appeared made her breath catch. "I might have something for you." Sophie's mind struggled to process the words. A job. From him. It did not make sense. It was too sudden, too unreal. She quickly typed back, "I do not have experience in anything important," her honesty surfacing again, almost like a defense mechanism. But before she could overthink it further, another message came through. "I'm not looking for experience," followed by, "I'm looking for someone I can trust." And that was when the second wave hit her, stronger than the first, because money could be explained, even generosity could be explained, but trust from a stranger, that was something else entirely, something far more complicated. Sophie felt her heart begin to race again, not from fear this time, but from a realization that this was no longer just about getting through the day. This was about stepping into something unknown, something that could change everything. And as she stood there on that quiet street, holding her baby close, she realized that the message she had sent by mistake had just opened a door she was not sure she was ready to walk through, but also not sure she could afford to ignore. Sophie stood still for several more seconds after reading his last message, the words echoing in her mind in a way that made everything else feel distant. "I am looking for someone I can trust." She repeated it quietly under her breath, as if saying it out loud might help her understand it better. But it only made it feel more real, more overwhelming, because trust was not something people offered her. It was something she had learned to earn slowly, carefully, and even then it was often taken away without warning. She adjusted her baby gently and started walking again, her steps slower now, more deliberate, as if each one carried the weight of a decision she had not fully made yet. Her phone still in her hand, screen lit. Waiting, she typed, then erased, then typed again, her thoughts tangled. Between hope and caution, "What kind of job?" she finally sent, keeping her words simple, controlled, because she did not want to sound desperate again, even though part of her already was. Across the city, Alexander Reed read her message almost immediately, as if he had been expecting it. He leaned back in his chair, the meeting now long over, his office quiet except for the faint hum of the city outside the window. He stared at the screen for a moment, considering how much to say, how far to go, because offering money was one thing, but offering a place in his world was something entirely different, something that came with consequences he rarely had to think about. Yet here he was, still thinking about her, still choosing to continue. He typed slowly, "It is a personal assistant position," then paused before adding, "Flexible hours, you could bring your baby if needed," and after another second, "I will make sure you are taken care of." He read it once more before sending, aware that what he was offering was not typical, not standard, but somehow it felt like the right thing to do. Sophie stopped walking again, this time just a few steps from her apartment building, her breath catching as she read the message. A personal assistant, flexible hours, bring your baby. Each word felt like it belonged to a different life, not hers, not the one she had been living. She looked up at the worn exterior of her building, then back at the screen, the contrast so sharp it almost felt unreal. Her mind immediately filled with questions, doubts, fears. Why her? Why now? What did he really want? But beneath all of that, there was something else, something quieter but stronger, a chance, maybe the first real chance she had been given in a long time. She typed carefully, "I do not have experience in that kind of work," then hesitated before adding, "and I cannot afford childcare." Even though he had already addressed that, because saying it out loud felt necessary, like she needed to remind both him and herself of the reality she lived in. Alexander read her response and exhaled slowly, not frustrated, but understanding. He had expected resistance, expected doubt, because people did not simply accept opportunities like this without questioning them, especially someone who had been through what she clearly had. He replied, "I understand," then added, "That is why I said you can bring your baby." And after a brief pause, "All I ask is that you show up and try." He set his phone down after sending it, giving her space, but also knowing that this was the moment that would decide everything. Sophie stood there in the fading light, her baby resting quietly against her, her phone still in her hand, and for the first time in a long while, the decision in front of her was not about survival. It was about stepping into something unknown, something that required more than just getting through the day. It required trust. And as she looked at the message one more time, her heart racing softly in her chest, she realized that saying yes could change her life, but saying no would keep it exactly the same. Sophie did not move for a long moment, the world around her fading into a quiet blur as she read his message again and again. "All I ask is that you show up and try." The simplicity of it made it harder, not easier, because there were no complicated terms to hide behind, no fine print to study, just a decision, a yes or a no, and the weight of it pressed heavily against everything she had learned about how the world worked. She slowly walked up the worn steps to her apartment, pushed the door open with her shoulder, and stepped inside, the familiar space greeting her with its quiet stillness. But something felt different now, like the room itself was waiting for her answer. She set the bag down on the small kitchen counter and carefully laid her baby in the crib, watching her for a second longer than usual, her chest tightening as she thought about what this could mean, not just for her, but for the tiny life depending on her every decision. She picked up her phone again, her fingers hovering as doubt crept back in. What if this was too good to be true? What if she failed? What if she walked into something she could not handle? But then another thought pushed through, sharper, clearer. What if this was the only chance she would get? Across the city, Alexander stood by the floor-to-ceiling windows in his office, looking out over the skyline as the sun began to dip lower, casting long shadows across the buildings. He was not checking his phone every second, but he was aware of it, aware that a decision was being made somewhere far below his world, a decision that, for reasons he still could not fully explain, mattered more to him than it should. He exhaled slowly, reminding himself that he had simply made an offer, nothing more, nothing binding. Yet there was a part of him that was waiting, something unfamiliar, something he had not felt in a long time. Sophie sat down on the edge of her small couch, her phone resting in her hands. She opened the message again, her eyes scanning the words as if they might change. But they did not. They stayed steady, patient, almost calm, and that was what made it real. She took a slow breath, then another, grounding herself in the moment before finally typing, "If I say yes, when would I start?" Her heart pounded as she read it back, the question itself already leaning toward a decision. And before she could lose her nerve, she hit send. The reply came faster than she expected. "Tomorrow." Just one word, direct and certain, followed by another message seconds later, "I will send a car for you at 9 in the morning." Sophie's eyes widened slightly. Tomorrow. It was happening too fast, faster than she had time to prepare, faster than she had time to second-guess herself. She felt a flicker of panic rise in her chest, mixing with the fragile excitement she had been trying to keep under control. She quickly typed, "I do not have anything appropriate to wear," the concern slipping out before she could stop it, because stepping into his world meant stepping into something she did not belong to, not yet. Alexander read her message and without hesitation replied, "Do not worry about that," then added, "Just be ready." His response was calm, almost effortless, as if the details she was worried about were not obstacles at all, but things that could be handled along the way. Sophie lowered her phone slowly, The reality of what she had just agreed to settling in around her. Tomorrow morning, a car would arrive, and with it, a path she had never imagined walking. She looked around her apartment one more time, at the walls that had witnessed her struggles, her fears, her quiet determination to keep going, and for the first time, she did not feel trapped by them. She felt like she was standing at the edge of something new, something uncertain, but full of possibility. And as she gently picked up her baby again, holding her close, she whispered softly, "We're going to try," not knowing exactly what tomorrow would bring, but knowing that for once, she was choosing to step forward instead of just holding on. The next morning arrived faster than Sophie expected, and for a brief moment when she opened her eyes, she forgot everything. But then reality returned all at once. Today was the day. She sat up slowly on the small couch where she had fallen asleep, still holding her baby close, the soft early light filtering through the thin curtains, making the apartment feel quieter than usual, almost as if it too was holding its breath. She glanced at the clock, 7:12 in the morning, less than 2 hours before the car would arrive, and suddenly a wave of nervous energy rushed through her. She stood up quickly, moving through the small space with purpose, pulling out the cleanest clothes she owned, a simple pair of jeans and a light sweater, nothing fancy, nothing close to what she imagined people in Alexander's world wore, but it was all she had, and for a moment, doubt crept in again, whispering that this was a mistake, that she did not belong there, that she would stand out in all the wrong ways. She shook her head slightly, pushing the thought aside as she carefully dressed her baby, choosing the softest outfit she had, smoothing it gently, as if preparing her for something important too. "We just have to try," she whispered again, repeating the words like a promise she was determined to keep. Across the city, Alexander Reed was already awake, his morning routine precise and uninterrupted. Yet there was a subtle shift in his focus. As he checked his schedule, his eyes lingered briefly on the block of time he had cleared, something he rarely did without a specific reason. He adjusted his cufflinks, his expression calm, composed, but beneath that calm was a quiet awareness that today was not entirely ordinary. Not anymore. Back in the apartment, time seemed to move both too fast and too slow. At once, every minute bringing Sophie closer to something she still could not fully understand. At 8:58, she stood near the window, her baby in her arms, her heart beating steadily but strongly. And then she saw it, a sleek black car pulling up in front of her building, its polished surface reflecting a world that felt far removed from her own. She froze for a second, her breath catching, because this was real now. There was no turning it into a possibility or a maybe. It was here. Her phone buzzed softly, a message from him. "The car is outside." Simple, direct, just like everything else he had said. Sophie swallowed hard, then took a slow step forward, then another, until she reached the door, her hand resting on the handle for a brief moment. This was the line, the point where staying the same ended and something new began, and as she opened the door and stepped outside, the cool morning air wrapped around her like a quiet welcome. The driver stepped out immediately, opening the back door with a polite nod, treating her not like someone out of place, but like someone expected, and that small detail made her pause, just for a second, before she carefully got in, holding her baby close as the door closed gently behind her. As the car pulled away from the curb, Sophie looked out the window, watching her street slowly disappear behind her, the familiar buildings fading into the distance, replaced by wider roads, taller structures, cleaner lines, everything shifting as if she was moving between two completely different worlds. Her reflection in the glass looked the same, but everything around her was changing, and as she sat there, quietly holding on to the only constant she had, her baby, one thought settled firmly in her mind. She had no idea what was waiting for her at the end of this ride, but whatever it was, there was no going back now. The car slowed to a smooth stop in front of a tall glass building that seemed to stretch endlessly into the sky. And for a moment, Sophie did not move, her eyes fixed on the reflection staring back at her through the tinted window. The same person who had stood in a cramped apartment just hours ago, now sitting in front of a place that felt like it belonged to an entirely different world. Her heart began to beat faster, not from fear alone, but from the weight of everything that had led her here. The wrong message, the unexpected reply, the decision she almost did not make. The driver stepped out and opened the door, his calm, professional gesture breaking her thoughts. "We are here," he said gently, and Sophie nodded, her throat tight as she carefully stepped out, holding her baby close. The ground beneath her feet feeling unfamiliar despite being just another sidewalk, because everything around her carried a sense of order, precision, and control that she had never been part of before. She looked up at the building again, its glass reflecting the morning light, and for a brief second, doubt returned stronger than ever, whispering that she did not belong here, that she would not fit, that this was a mistake waiting to be exposed. But then her baby shifted slightly in her arms, and that small movement anchored her, reminding her why she had come, why she had said yes. And slowly, she took a step forward, then another, until the automatic doors opened in front of her. Inside, the air felt cooler, quieter, the lobby wide and polished, people moving with purpose, dressed in sharp lines and neutral tones. And for a moment, Sophie felt every difference between her life and theirs, the simplicity of her clothes, the uncertainty in her steps. But before she could retreat into that feeling, a voice called her name, Sophie Miller. She turned quickly, surprised, and saw a woman approaching her with a calm, welcoming expression. "I am Claire. Mr. Reed asked me to bring you up," the woman said, her tone respectful, not questioning, not dismissive, and that alone shifted something inside Sophie, because she was not being treated like someone who did not belong. She was being expected. They walked toward the elevator, each step echoing softly in the quiet space. And as the doors closed and began to rise, Sophie felt the subtle shift again, like she was moving not just upward, but forward into something she could not fully see yet. When the doors opened, the floor was quieter, more private, the kind of place where decisions were made that shaped everything below. Claire led her down a hallway and stopped in front of a set of large doors, turning slightly with a small, reassuring smile. "He is inside," she said before gently opening them. Sophie stepped forward slowly, her breath catching as she entered. And there he was, Alexander Reed, standing near the window, the city stretching out behind him. He turned as she walked in, his expression calm, composed, but his eyes focused directly on her, not her clothes, not her situation, just her. And for a moment, everything else seemed to fade. Neither of them spoke immediately, the silence not uncomfortable, but filled with something unspoken, something that had been building since that first message. And then finally, he took a step forward and said simply, "You came," and Sophie nodded, her voice quiet but steady as she replied, "I said I would." And in that moment, it was no longer about a mistake or a favor. It was about a beginning, one neither of them had planned, but both had chosen to step into.